It's not the end of the world, at least not today. Yet whenever I hear that phrase, my mind drifts somewhere much larger. I picture the distant future when our sun, after burning peacefully for billions of years, begins its final transformation. It will swell into a red giant so vast that it will eventually swallow the earth whole. Long before that day arrives, the oceans will boil away into space, and eventually even the rocks and soil beneath our feet will dissolve back into the star that gave us life. Every empire that ever rose, every love story ever whispered, every war, every symphony, every quiet moment of human joy or sorrow, all of it will vanish as if it never existed. The entire record of humanity stretched across thousands of centuries, erased in cosmic silence. Unless we somehow carry our stories to another world, there will be no trace left, no monuments, no memories, just the indifferent glow of an aging star. And yet, this thought doesn't crush me. Strangely, it does the opposite, because if everything is this temporary, then the present moment becomes almost unbearably precious. Our lives are so brief. Here, one heartbeat, gone the next. We blink and another year disappears. We postpone our dreams, waiting for the perfect conditions that never quite arrive. But when I sit quietly and really let this truth settle in, I feel a gentle urgency rising inside me. Not anxiety, but a deep call to live more honestly. Why waste what little time we have performing a version of ourselves that doesn't feel real? Why hold back our creativity, our love, our curiosity, when this one life is the only one we're certain to have? We can't know what comes after this, if anything at all. That uncertainty used to frighten me. Now it feels like an invitation. This awareness doesn't make me want to chase every pleasure or burn everything down. It makes me want to go deeper, to create things that matter to me, to love more openly, to finally start becoming the person I sense I'm capable of being, before the sun claims us all. The beautiful paradox is this: accepting that everything ends somehow makes the time we have feel more alive, more colorful, more worth our full attention. What about you? When you truly sit with the temporary nature of everything, your body, your relationships, even this planet, what changes inside you? What do you feel called to do differently while you're still here? Even knowing the sun will eventually erase every trace of Earth, I still catch myself thinking about legacy. It feels almost ridiculous at first. Why build anything if it's all destined to disappear? But the more I sit with this truth, the more my idea of legacy begins to shift. It's no longer about creating something that outlives the death of the solar system. That kind of immortality was always an illusion anyway. Instead, I've started wondering what it means to leave something meaningful behind while we're still here, knowing it too will one day fade. Legacy, I'm realizing, might be far more intimate than I once believed. It's the way a conversation I had with someone changed how they see the world. It's the small act of kindness that ripples quietly through someone's difficult day. It's the art I create, not because it needs to survive for centuries, but because it was honest when it left my hands. We chase monuments, books, businesses, buildings, follower counts, hoping they'll prove we mattered. Yet the universe gently reminds us that even the pyramids will turn to dust one day. So perhaps the deepest legacy isn't permanence, it's impact. The way we touched other living beings during our short time overlapping with theirs. This thought has changed how I approach my own creativity. I no longer feel the crushing pressure to make something eternal. I just want to make something real. Something that reflects who I actually am right now.
a piece of writing, a moment of genuine connection, a creation that carries my curiosity, my doubts, my wonder. If it helps even one person feel less alone, then that feels like enough of a legacy. And maybe that's the quiet beauty in all of this. When we accept that nothing lasts forever, we stop performing for an imagined future audience and start living more fully for the people around us today. We become freer to take risks, to be vulnerable, to pour love into whatever we do, because the clock is ticking, not just on our lives, but on everything we build. In the end, the most beautiful legacies might be the invisible ones, the softened hearts, the inspired minds, the courage passed from one person to another. These things may not survive the red giant, but they made the brief human story brighter while it was unfolding. And for now, that feels like more than enough.
There's a quiet paradox I keep returning to. The very thing that makes life feel heartbreaking, its temporary nature, is also what makes it so incredibly beautiful. Think about cherry blossoms in spring. They don't live very long, a few glorious days at most, and yet their brief existence is precisely why people travel across countries just to stand beneath them in awe. If those flowers lasted all year, would we still feel the same reverence? Would we still stop and truly see them? I've started to believe that impermanence is not just a limitation, it's the secret ingredient that gives everything its flavor. A sunset wouldn't move us so deeply if it lasted for hours. A song wouldn't touch us the same way if it never had to end. Even our most meaningful relationships carry weight because we know, somewhere deep down, that they won't last forever. If everything were permanent, life might actually become dull. Imagine never losing anyone, never watching anything change, never having to say goodbye. At first, it might sound comforting, but over time, it could strip away the urgency, the tenderness, the appreciation. Nothing would feel rare. Nothing would feel precious. This realization has been slowly changing how I see my own days. The moments that pass too quickly, a deep conversation with a friend, the way light falls across the room in the morning, the burst of inspiration that arrives without warning. These are the moments I'm learning to hold more gently, not by trying to make them permanent, but by being fully present while they last. There's a kind of freedom in accepting that nothing lasts. It allows me to love more openly, to create more bravely, and to experience things more completely. I don't need to freeze time, I only need to show up for it. The temporary nature of life doesn't have to be a tragedy. It can be an invitation to see the world with softer eyes and a more grateful heart, to find beauty not despite the ending, but because of it. What about you? When you think about the fleeting things in your own life, moments, experiences, even certain relationships, can you feel how their temporary nature actually makes them more beautiful? What would change if you started treating them with that same delicate appreciation right now? What if this is it? What if there is no afterlife, no eternal soul, no guarantee that our names or our stories will echo through the centuries? Just this one brief, luminous life, and then silence. For many people, that thought feels crushing, but I've been sitting with it for a while now, and something unexpected has happened. Instead of despair, I've started to feel a strange kind of liberation. If nothing lasts forever, then meaning cannot depend on forever. It has to be found right here, in the temporary, in the small daily choices, in the way we treat people, in the things we create, not because they'll survive us, but because creating them feels alive. I used to believe that a meaningful life needed some kind of permanent stamp, a legacy, a body of work that outlasts me, some cosmic scorecard. But what if that's not true? What if the deepest meaning comes from how fully we inhabit our days?
from the love we give, even when we know it won't last, from the art we make, even if no one remembers it in 100 years, from the quiet integrity of becoming a little more ourselves while we still can. This shift has changed me. I no longer feel I'm performing for some future audience or eternal judge. I'm creating because the act of creating brings me alive. I'm loving because connection feels sacred in its fragility. I'm pursuing growth not to become perfect or immortal, but because expanding feels like the most honest way to spend this short time. There is a beautiful dignity in building meaning without guarantees. It's honest, it's brave, it forces us to care about the present moment instead of endlessly postponing our lives for some imagined eternal reward. We don't need the universe to promise us forever in order to live meaningfully. We only need the courage to care deeply anyway, to show up, to feel everything, to leave each day a little more awake than we entered it. In the end, perhaps the most profound thing we can do is to love this temporary life so completely that its temporary nature stops frightening us and starts inspiring us instead. What about you? If you truly accepted that there may be no afterlife and no guaranteed legacy, what would a meaningful life look like for you? How would you begin building that kind of meaning starting today?
I used to be a master at waiting. I told myself I would start creating when I had more time. I would chase my real dreams once I felt ready. I would have deeper conversations, take bigger risks, and finally live more authentically someday. But here's what I've come to realize. Someday is one of the most dangerous illusions we carry. It's gentle, comforting, and completely deceptive. It convinces us that life is long and forgiving, that the conditions will eventually be perfect, that future versions of ourselves will somehow be braver, more disciplined, and more prepared than we are right now. The truth is much quieter and more urgent. Most of the life we keep postponing is happening right now, in these ordinary days. While we're waiting for motivation, for the right moment, for more money, or for fear to disappear, time keeps moving, and someday has a cruel habit of never arriving. I've started noticing how many people I know are still waiting. Waiting to write the book, waiting to travel, waiting to speak honestly in their relationships, waiting to become who they sense they truly are. And I catch myself doing it too. The mind is incredibly skilled at inventing reasons why today isn't the right day. But when I remember the temporary nature of everything, the red giant sun, the fleeting cherry blossoms, the single life we're almost certain to have, the illusion of someday begins to dissolve. There is no dress rehearsal. This is it. So I've begun asking myself a different question. If not now, then when? What am I willing to begin even if I'm not ready? What matters enough that I'll start messy, imperfect, and uncertain? Because the cost of waiting is far higher than the cost of beginning. Every time I choose to start, even in small ways, I feel something inside me come back to life. A quiet excitement, a sense of alignment, a gentle rebellion against the myth that tells us our real life is coming later. The beautiful part is this: we don't have to transform our entire lives overnight. We only need to stop betraying the present moment by constantly mortgaging it to an imaginary future. What about you? What have you been quietly postponing until someday? And if you truly knew that someday might never come, what small, brave step would you be willing to take this week? There's a delicate balance I've been trying to learn. On one side is the quiet awareness that life is temporary, that someday is uncertain, and time is precious. On the other side is the risk of turning that awareness into pressure, anxiety, or relentless hustle. I call this balance gentle urgency. It's the art of feeling deeply motivated without burning myself out. Gentle urgency doesn't scream at me to do more, faster, better. It whispers, "This matters. You are here now. Let's not waste it." It's less about frantic productivity and more about quiet devotion. It's the difference between rushing through my days and moving through them with clear intention and calm presence. I've noticed when I force myself with harsh deadlines or heavy self-pressure, eventually I crash. But when I approach my time with gentle urgency, something different happens. I create more consistently. I show up more fully. I rest when I need to without guilt, because I know rest is also part of living well. This gentle urgency comes from remembering the red giant sun and the cherry blossoms, but not letting that knowledge frighten me. Instead, it softens me. It helps me ask better questions. What feels meaningful today? What small thing can I do that aligns with who I want to become? How can I give this day my honest attention without exhausting myself? It means saying yes to the things that truly matter and saying no more often to distractions. It means working with focus, but also knowing when to step back and let life breathe. It's a sustainable fire, warm and steady rather than explosive and short-lived. I'm still learning this. Some days I slip back into old patterns of waiting or pushing too hard. But the more I practice gentle urgency, the more alive I feel. Not anxious, not numb, just quietly, deeply engaged with this one temporary life. What about you? How do you want to hold the awareness that life is short, with anxiety and pressure, or with a calm but deep urgency? What might gentle urgency look like in your own days?
One of the most beautiful and defiant things a person can do is create something while knowing it might not last. In the grand scheme, with suns swallowing planets and entire civilizations dissolving into cosmic dust, why bother writing, painting, filming, composing, or building anything at all? This question used to haunt me, but now I see it differently. Creating in the face of oblivion is not naive. It's one of the most honest and courageous responses to our temporary existence. We create not because we expect it to survive eternity, but because the act of creating connects us to life itself. It's how we say, "I was here," even if no one remembers in 1,000 years. There's something deeply moving about a person who plants a garden knowing they may never see it fully bloom, or writes a song that only a handful of people will ever hear, or pours their heart into a project that might disappear. These acts aren't foolish, they're sacred, precisely because they're temporary. I've stopped waiting for my work to be important or permanent. Instead, I create because something inside me needs to come out, because making things makes me feel more alive, because in the moment of creation, time feels different, richer, slower, more meaningful. The red giant sun doesn't get a vote in whether I write today. The eventual erasure of humanity doesn't get to decide if my ideas matter right now. This perspective has freed me. I no longer create for legacy. I create for the present, for the joy of shaping something that didn't exist before, for the quiet satisfaction of expressing what words alone cannot hold. And strangely, the things I make with this mindset often end up touching people more deeply. We don't need the universe's permission or a guarantee of immortality to create. The fact that it will all end someday is exactly why our creations matter, not forever, but right now. What about you? Is there something you've been wanting to create? Writing, art, music, a project, a business, anything, but held back because you wonder if it will matter in the long run? What might shift if you allowed yourself to create anyway, even knowing it might not last?
After years of waiting for someday, performing versions of myself I thought the world wanted, and chasing things I was told would make me enough, I've begun to feel a quiet but profound return. I'm coming home to myself, not to some idealized, perfect version, but to the real me that was always underneath the noise. The one who had dreams, curiosities, and ways of seeing the world that I had quietly abandoned along the way. This homecoming didn't happen through some dramatic breakthrough. It happened through small, honest moments when I finally admitted what I actually care about, what drains me, and what makes me feel alive. Accepting the temporary nature of everything has made this return feel more urgent and more gentle at the same time. Because if this life is short, why spend so much of it wearing masks? Why keep betraying my own nature just to fit in or impress people who will eventually be gone too? Coming home to yourself means slowly peeling away the layers, the expectations, the old stories, the fear of disappointing others. It means giving yourself permission to change, to want different things, to create in ways that might not make sense to anyone else. It's the relief of finally stopping the performance and simply being. Some days it feels like meeting an old friend I haven't seen in years. There's recognition, there's tenderness, there's also grief for all the time I spent away from myself. But mostly, there's a deep sense of rightness, like pieces are falling back into place. This return isn't about becoming selfish, it's about becoming real. When I'm more honest with myself, I show up more honestly for others. When I honor my own inner voice, I have more genuine energy to give. The temporary nature of life stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like permission to finally be who I am. I'm still on this journey. I imagine I always will be. But every step closer to myself feels like the most important work I can do with the time I have left. What about you? How far away from yourself have you drifted over the years? What parts of you have you abandoned or silenced in the name of someday, productivity, or fitting in? What might it feel like to begin coming home to yourself now?
I want to talk about today, specifically today. Not a remarkable day, not a day where something significant happened or a decision was made that changed the direction of things. Just an ordinary day. The kind that most of life is actually made of. Here's something I've been sitting with. The ordinary day is the one we tend to live least fully. We're present for the peaks, the celebrations, the crises, the moments that get photographed and stored and returned to. But the unremarkable Tuesday, the Wednesday afternoon that blended into Thursday without anything distinguishing it, those pass largely unlived, experienced at partial attention, moved through rather than inhabited. And when you do the math on it, when you actually account for how many days in a life are ordinary versus extraordinary, you realize that the ordinary day is not the backdrop to the real life. It is the real life. Almost all of it. There's a quality I've been trying to develop, which I can only describe as noticing. A deliberate decision to bring more of my actual attention to the texture of what's in front of me during the hours that don't demand it. The particular quality of light at a specific time of morning. The way a familiar route looks when I'm actually looking at it rather than thinking about something else while moving through it. The taste of something ordinary, eaten with enough presence to actually taste it. The specific sound a room makes when it's quiet. These aren't mystical experiences.
They're just the actual contents of the day finally received, rather than filtered into the background. What I've found is that the ordinary day, when you actually meet it, is far richer than its reputation suggests. There's texture in it that gets completely missed when attention is distributed across the past and the future, things that were said yesterday, things that need to happen tomorrow, while the present hums along unnoticed. There's a kind of grief, I think, that comes from looking back at periods of your life and realizing you weren't really there for them. The years that went by in a kind of functional haze. The months absorbed by productivity or worry or distraction with very little actually landing. The relationships that happened alongside a life rather than inside one. I don't say this as a verdict. I say it because the alternative is available. Presence isn't a mystical achievement. It's closer to a habit of redirecting attention gently, repeatedly, back to what's actually here. The ordinary day contains a conversation that can't happen again in exactly this way. It contains a version of the light that will never be precisely replicated. It contains you, at this specific age, with this specific accumulation of experience, moving through a world that is continuously changing in ways so gradual they're invisible day to day. All of that is in the ordinary day. Most of it goes unnoticed. I think about what I said in the previous segment, about the sun eventually reclaiming the earth, about all the humans who lived and loved and vanished. And it makes the ordinary day feel less like something to get through, more like something to be inside, fully, with whatever quality of attention I can bring to it. The extraordinary days take care of themselves. They arrive with enough force that presence is almost unavoidable. It's the ordinary days that require the practice. The quiet Tuesday, the unremarkable walk, the dinner that is just dinner, except that it's also your actual life, happening right now, irreversibly. So here's what I find myself wondering. When you think about the last truly ordinary day you had, one with no particular event to anchor it, were you actually in it? Or were you somewhere else while your body moved through it?
Try to hold this number in your mind. 4.5 billion. That's the age of the Earth in years. Not 4.5 million, billion. The number is so large that it doesn't really land as a number. The mind encounters it and produces something closer to a vague impression of vastness, then quietly moves on, because there's nothing in daily human experience that gives 4.5 billion years any useful frame of reference. But there's a way of making it tangible that I keep returning to. Compress the entire history of the Earth into a single calendar year. January 1st, the planet forms from collapsing gas and rock around a young sun. The first simple life appears sometime in March. The first multicellular organisms don't show up until around September. The dinosaurs appear on Christmas Day. They go extinct 3 days later, on December 28th. And all of human history, every civilization, every war, every invention, every person who ever lived and loved and left a mark, fits inside the last 14 seconds of December 31st. 14 seconds. Out of a year. I find this simultaneously humbling and somehow clarifying. Because when the human story shrinks to that proportion, 14 seconds in a year that contains the entirety of planetary history, something interesting happens to the things we spend most of our energy worried about. They don't disappear exactly, but they become smaller in a way that feels less like despair and more like relief. What deep time does to human priorities is hard to articulate precisely, but I'll try. It removes a certain kind of urgency. The pressured, contracted urgency, the feeling behind, a feeling like things are going wrong, a feeling like the stakes of any given moment are absolute and final. Because from the vantage point of deep time, very little is absolute and final.
The species has survived ice ages, mass extinctions, plagues, the collapse of every civilization that has ever risen. It keeps producing new things, new people, new ideas, with a persistence that 4.5 billion years of context makes look almost unstoppable. At the same time, and this is the tension that I find most interesting, deep time also intensifies something, the preciousness of right now. The 14 seconds, the fact that we happen to exist inside this specific, unrepeatable sliver of the timeline, conscious, awake, capable of asking questions about the whole thing, is statistically extraordinary. You could run the history of this planet 1,000 times and not land here again. So the effect of deep time, if you hold both ends of it simultaneously, is something like this. The small anxieties get smaller, and the actual experience of being alive gets larger. The daily frustrations are put in their context, which is a context so vast that most of them don't survive the comparison. And the fact of consciousness, of relationship, of beauty, of any of it existing at all becomes something close to astonishing. There's a practice I've started. When something feels urgent in a pressured, constricting way, the kind of urgency that shuts the world down rather than opening it up, I try to locate it in geological time. How does this look from 1,000 years from now? From 10,000? Usually the contraction eases. The breath comes back. The situation remains real and worth addressing, but it stops being the totality of everything. Deep time is a perspective technology, a way of zooming out until the proportions of things reassemble themselves more honestly. And what it keeps returning me to is the same place the ordinary day returns me to. Here, now, inside the 14 seconds, which, when you know what surrounds them, turn out to be the most remarkable 14 seconds in 4.5 billion years. So I'm curious. If you placed your current biggest worry or preoccupation inside the full sweep of geological time, held it against 4.5 billion years of planetary history, does it change at all? And if it does, what does it leave behind?
Most of us, at some point, think about what we'll leave behind. A body of work, a name that persists, children who carry something forward, an idea that outlasts the person who had it. The desire to leave a mark, to have mattered in some way that survives the ending, feels like one of the most deeply human impulses there is. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But I've been questioning the frame. Because when I hold the legacy question up against everything we explored in deep time, the 14th seconds, the 4.5 billion years, the sun eventually reclaiming everything, the conventional idea of legacy starts to look a little different. The vast majority of people who have ever lived are completely forgotten. Their names are gone, their faces unrecoverable, the specific texture of their inner lives, what they feared, what they loved, what made them laugh, dissolved as completely as if it had never existed. And yet they lived, fully, as far as we can tell, with the same urgency and feeling and meaning-making that we bring to our own days. The forgetting didn't undo the living. This is the thing I keep sitting with. The question isn't really whether the record survives. The record, in the long run, doesn't. Nothing survives the sun. So if legacy is about permanence, then legacy is a project with a guaranteed failure at the end of it. And the only question is how long the delay between the living and the disappearing happens to be. But there's another way to hold this, a way that I find more honest and, strangely, more motivating. What if legacy isn't primarily about what you leave for the future, but about what you leave in the present, in the people around you, right now, in the quality of attention you bring to the relationships you're actually in the specific way you make someone feel seen or less alone or more capable of their own life. That kind of legacy doesn't require posterity. It doesn't need to survive a century or even a decade. It happens in real time, person to person, in the ordinary moments that we've been talking about.
the ones that pass largely unnoticed but that accumulate into something that quietly shapes the people who were there for them. I think about the people who shaped me. Most of them will not be remembered in any formal sense. Their names won't be in any record. But something they did, a way they spoke to me, a quality of attention they offered, a moment of honesty or warmth or challenge that landed at exactly the right time is still operating in me, still influencing how I think, how I treat people, what I reach for. They are part of how I move through the world even now, even as their own names fade. That seems like enough to me. More than enough. There's also something worth saying about the internal dimension of legacy, the one that has nothing to do with how anyone else remembers you. The question of whether you lived in a way you recognized as yours, whether the choices you made were made from something genuine rather than from fear or performance or the desire to appear a certain way to observers who themselves will be forgotten. To have lived well, I think, is to have been actually present for the life you were living, to have felt what was there to be felt, to have shown up honestly in the relationships that mattered, to have done work that meant something to you regardless of how widely it traveled. The legacy that matters most might be the one you leave in yourself, the evidence visible only to you that you were here and that you used the time. The record will disappear. The living won't. And in the end, the living is the only part that was ever really the point. So I'm curious, when you imagine looking back on your life from its very end, what would you need to have done or felt or been to feel that you genuinely used the time? And how much of that is actually available to you right now, today?
We've traveled quite a distance together through these thoughts, from the distant death of our sun to the fleeting beauty of cherry blossoms, through the myth of someday, the quiet power of gentle urgency, and the tender journey of coming home to ourselves. All of it circling around one simple, life-changing truth. Everything is temporary. And yet here we are, still breathing, still capable of feeling, creating, loving, and choosing. That fact alone feels miraculous when you really let it sink in. This awareness of impermanence doesn't have to leave us heavy. It can lighten us. It can soften us. It can invite us to hold our days more loosely and more dearly at the same time, to stop performing, to start creating, to love more bravely, to rest without guilt, to walk through this world with gentler eyes and a more awake heart. In the end, we don't need eternity to live meaningfully. We don't need a guarantee of legacy to create something beautiful. We don't need forever to matter right now. A life well lived, perhaps, is not one that lasts the longest or is remembered the most. It's one where we showed up as honestly as we could, where we felt things deeply, where we created even when no one was watching, where we loved even though we knew it wouldn't last, where we returned to ourselves again and again with patience and courage. The red giant sun will come eventually. The cherry blossoms will fall. Our names may fade, but none of that can touch the vividness of a single moment where we were fully here, awake, open, and alive. So as this chapter closes, I hope you carry this gentle reminder with you. Your time is limited, precious, and completely yours. Don't wait to live it. Don't wait to become yourself. The universe has already given you everything you need, this one wild, temporary, beautiful life. Use it well, love it deeply, and when the time comes, let it go with gratitude. What about you, my friend? Looking back at everything we've explored together, what feels most alive in you right now? What one small or brave thing are you willing to do, starting today, to honor this temporary and miraculous life?